Welcome to the Glucose Never Lies podcast. I'm John Pemberton, a diabetes educator and researcher living with type 1 diabetes since 2008. I started the Glucose Never Lies website when my son tested positive for type 1 diabetes antibodies. In that moment, I realised I needed to build a resource strong enough to guide anyone who might care for him. At first, that meant writing clear, actionable management guides, but listening to Peter Attia's The Drive taught me something. Peter's conversations provide depth across nutrition, exercise, pharmacology, sleep, and much more. But I always find myself wondering, how does this information apply to people with type 1 diabetes? And this podcast is my attempt to fill that gap. I have access to the world's leading researchers and thought leaders in type 1 diabetes. That gives me a unique opportunity to combine lived experience, professional expertise, and cutting-edge science, and to share it all on here in conversation. But an important note, this podcast is for informational purposes only. These conversations share knowledge and experiences. They do not create a therapeutic relationship. So, let's get started. Welcome to the Glucose Never Lies end of year 2025 review. So, first of all, this is ideally a session to just capture what's happened to the Glucose Never Lies over 2025, what we've learned, how things have changed. But to do that, I'm going to introduce Anjanee Kohli, who I work with and who at the Children's Hospital of Birmingham, but who's also came on board as the creative director of the Glucose Never Lies around about halfway in the year. One of my just amazing people in my life from a lot of personal and also work things that have happened this year has been a rock for me. So it's interesting to get her on the show. First of all, to quiz me with some questions, but also to introduce her formally to the Glucose Never Lies audience as someone who's been a massive part, certainly over the last 6 months. So a big intro. Welcome aboard.
Hi, thanks for having me. That was a big intro. I don't know if I can match up to that.
It certainly can. So I'm going to hand the reins over to you. So we've had a little chat about this. There's a few people have been kind of asking about are you going to do kind of a review of the podcast, a review of what's been going on? So we thought we'd put it all together in a yearly review, and it might be something we move forward on a sort of quarterly or 6 monthly basis, but we'll just see how it goes first. It might turn out to be a load of rubbish and people go, do you know what? Don't do that again. Or they might think, actually, it's such a useful review to capture what's been going on, episodes
Yeah.
that have been missed, bits and pieces that they may have not been aware of. So I'll hand over to you and we'll kick off.
So first of all, I mean, I know you've probably answered this in a few different formats, especially on like the Instagram page via the stuff with the kids. But firstly, why and how did the Glucose Never Lies podcast start?
Yeah, so obviously the platform started officially back in 2019 when my son tested positive for screening antibodies, which turned out to be negative. But that led to me putting together a resource to try and support people. And it grew a little bit from there, just in terms of size. But yeah, towards the end of 2024 or throughout to 2024, a lot of people reached out sort of saying, we're enjoying the content. We really appreciate the written guides, but it'd be really interesting to kind of get some more perspective on different things, especially as you'll go to conferences to get a lowdown on what's actually happening. And to try and do that within a written space, number one, people don't often like to consume written content. They prefer to be able to sort of listen to it in a relaxed way, hopefully. So therefore, it was trying to kind of put it into how I was going to do it. So it was first of all driven by what people wanted, but then I did a couple of attempts. So I did some sort of AI voiceover stuff and put some of the content in. So the content was actually quite good, but everyone sort of fed back and said, oh, look, like having some cheesy American voiceover and it's not actually your voice and when it's your stuff doesn't really fit sort of the authenticity. And I think you've heard me say a million times at work, you've got to have your skin in the game. And it was a complete lack of skin in the game from me in terms of if you want it to be good, you've got to invest time and energy. Like that's not a thing for AI if you want it to be personalized. So kind of then decided to do a podcast. And if I knew what it involved to do it right, I probably wouldn't have started. The reason why I say that is like, first of all, is you do about 12 grand down the swan because you've got to get all the equipment if you're going to do it properly. But also then you've got to make sure that the content's good. And fortunately, we had quite a lot of content already on the Glucose Never Lies that we could start off with. And Louise from work was brilliant. So if you listen to the first 10 to 12 episodes, I did the first 10 to 12 episodes with Louise Collins, diabetes nurse from the Children's Hospital, who's very experienced, just a brilliant practitioner. And we basically covered all the basics of the glucose never lies, and it sort of went down well. And then we'd sort of cover the content, and then it was time then to go, well, what's next? We've covered CGM, automated insulin delivery systems. What is diabetes? Some other principal bits. But then, obviously, if we wanted to bring information that's up to date by the leading people, we needed to then kind of like go a bit further afield and reach out a bit further.
Yeah. Okay. I think that it's really useful for people to go back and listen to those initial episodes, if they really want to kind of cement their knowledge before they go on to the more in-depth stuff. And the episodes, like you said, with Louise were really valuable because, I work with her as well, and she's just amazing. Like the way that she is with patients, but also like how forward thinking and dynamic she is as well. So yeah, I think it'd be really useful for people to listen to those.
Yeah, I mean, out of all the episodes, there's two episodes in there that really stick out to me that are probably my favorites of the whole podcast. And that's number 7, which is the principles of the glucose never lies, which just covers the 3 main things, which essentially explain why type 1 diabetes is so difficult to manage. Number 1, the insulin goes in the wrong place. It goes into the fat tissue on the outside of the body rather than on the portal vein that directly goes into the liver. So you miss a lot of opportunities to store glucose in the liver, and that's one huge problem. And the second one, that insulin is very slow in comparison to the insulin that's produced from the pancreas by an order of like 20-fold, which makes a huge difference. Those two key drivers as to why things make a difference or make it difficult. And then the third one, when you have a high fat meal, how that causes insulin resistance, something called the DAG effect. If you understand those 3 things, most things within diabetes, of type 1 diabetes, why things happen, are explainable, and then you've got solutions. But if you don't understand those 3 things, it can seem very confusing. So yeah, that's probably one of my favorites. Then the second one would be the activity snacking. I've spent a lot of time professionally trying to get the message out that essentially activity is the best time in range tool. So we kind of put all that together there, and obviously you've got Grace's rap of 99 problems, but highs ain't one on there as well, which is a lot of fun to make with this. So yeah, I think those early ones really cemented what we do at the Glucose Never Lies is kind of principle based first. If you understand the principles, then the solutions become understandable and implementable. But if you don't understand the principles, it's then difficult to gather why you would want to do stuff.
Yeah, and I suppose if I'm reflecting on, how we teach people that are living with diabetes here at the Children's, that activity snacking one is huge, in terms of it's one of the first lessons that we teach people.
Yeah, I
Don't
mean,
be afraid of activity, use it as a tool to bring down your glucose levels.
yeah, it's just
Yeah.
really separating the key thing of activity and movement is a time in range tool, and it should be taught that
Hmm.
way. Exercise, on the flip side, is a risk of hypoglycemia, so you need to plan differently. If you can hear things in the background, we
Yeah.
just got 2 puppies, uh, Fred and
And your
Ginger,
mascots.
yesterday. A little
Yeah.
Labrador, so it is continual barking. That's just how life's going to be.
Yeah. 2 kids, 2 Labradors, a new podcast. Yeah, you put a lot on your plate. So I suppose what you just said, that was a question that I was going to ask later on, but what questions keep on coming up across the podcast that you didn't anticipate possibly?
I think a lot of it is why things happen. So I think healthcare professionals or information out there in general is very good at telling you what to do, but doesn't
Hmm.
really end up explaining why it happens in the first place. And if you don't have that foundational knowledge of things like generally the insulin's in the wrong place, the insulin's very slow in comparison to others, that high fat meals because of this reason causes issues, then when you come to receiving information, if you don't really understand the problem in the background, why are you going to believe that it works? And
Hmm.
I just feel like if you get the principles right first, so just really a lot of directing people to those and sort of saying, look, if you understand these, you can probably work out your own solutions. The rest of the stuff is just kind of like the how to based off what people have found useful. But if you don't understand the principles, it's difficult. So I think that's what's come back loud and clear is the appreciation of not too complex, but enough complexity to really get it and get why it's difficult. And then on the flip side of that, then how to actually implement things kind of moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. So after those principal episodes, so how did you branch out to other people and decide what was needed going
Y-
forward?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like in anything, you try to scratch your own itch. What is it you want to know about that you think is important for you, you'd want to hear? And I've been
Mhm.
fortunate enough through some of the professional work and publications to network with some really cool people. So Othman Moser is used to basically a friend of mine now, which is really nice. But met him back in 2022 on an ISPAD guideline. And when it comes to international guidelines on exercise, he is like the key lead author on all the recent papers. So I'm fortunate to have people like him. And then Desi is also a good friend who I met through ISPAD 2022 guidelines as well. And we brought both of those on board as scientific advisors because they're friends, but also unbelievable professionals. So those are kind of easy reach outs in some ways because it already had a way in and they knew me. So that was nice. But then there's a few instances of taking a few brave pills as well. Never met Viral Shah in my life before, but he is the man when it comes to GLP-1s and type 1 diabetes. And what I was really surprised is when you reach out to people and sort of say, look, I want to do a podcast on this. This is what I know. This is the way I'm thinking about framing it. And this is where I think you would be the best person in the world to come and speak about it. I think if you approach people like that, then actually it's their area. They want to talk about it. They, have got so much to offer and give that they can't necessarily put across in an academic paper what they can give and that. So some of that is just kind of reaching out to people and you're surprised to think that actually they're really keen. They're really keen to come on board because they want to talk about this stuff. They want a different platform other than just a research paper, which in reality, very few people read.
Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah.
killer when you know how much work goes into it. But the opportunities to go and explain it is I guess what the glucose stabilizers offer a few people potentially. So reaching out, yeah, just sort of getting your brave pills out and sending some mad emails at 6 o'clock in the morning and seeing
Yeah.
what you get back.
Yeah. I suppose, like you said, it is important because, like a lot of academics, like you said, the papers are one thing, but being able to talk around them and maybe kind of portray what didn't make it into the papers is is a good thing as well.
I mean, that came out loud and clear when I was speaking to Offner.
Yeah.
I've been involved in a
Yeah.
few consensus papers. What people speak about behind closed doors, what they actually do, doesn't always make its way out to the paper because there may not be a clear evidence base for it, despite the leading clinicians knowing that it works. So that's the beauty of doing a podcast with people like Othma, Viral Shah, Laura Messer, Desi. They can speak to the evidence, but then they can also speak to their individual. If they've got type 1 diabetes experience, but also their clinical experience, obviously with the caveats of common sense. Don't just use what we said. It's like this is what we do in clinical practice. Speak to your healthcare team, etc. But for giving the opportunity to understand how they implement the evidence in their own practice, I think really then offers clinicians something to think about. Offer people with diabetes an understanding of what's possible. And I certainly learned loads off the GLP-1 episode, especially was kind of mad to me
Yeah.
that from the off 30% reductions in total daily insulin from the off from ball one, no weight loss involved, just straight there. But also the improvements in post meal glucose control because you're basically reducing the glucagon output by the liver by taking these GLP-1s. So from that, I went and experimented with some GLP-1s, and sure enough, within the first dose, if I hadn't reduced my insulin dose down as was suggested, I would have been hypo all the time. So yeah, I've learned loads from those episodes. It's brilliant.
Yeah. And I suppose if you think about it, the way that the GLP-1s work, they delay gastric emptying, so it kind of makes sense that your post-meal glucose
Yeah.
would be
So I mean, there's
better
the
as
two
well.
things. Yeah. So you slow
Yeah.
down the stomach, the
Yeah.
cap leaving the stomach, which is going to allow your 4 hour insulin or 6 hour insulin profile to match that food better. But the other big thing is because I mentioned before, and this comes back to principles, if you don't have insulin delivered from your pancreas into the portal vein, you also don't have insulin going from your pancreas in the beta cells, which is the insulin producing ones, a direct negative feedback on the alpha cells in the pancreas that produce glucagon. And because when you have type 1 diabetes, you don't have it going directly from the pancreas, your levels of insulin in your pancreas and around your portal vein are so low, they can't slow down glucagon output. So you're struggling, but you take a GLP-1, it has a straight negative impact on negative feedback on the alpha cells. So it sort of does the job that the insulin was meant to do if it was in the right place. So that allows then stops the glucagon going to the liver and pushing more glucose out. So you're going to get a dual effect essentially. And certainly from my personal experience, I saw that almost too much on the gastric emptying, because I remember taking a too big a dose of Monjaro the first time, and oh my God, I couldn't look at a plate of food. It scared me. It scared me.
I think I remember you messaging after you took and sent a picture of, like, your half full plate afterwards.
Uh,
Out of interest, were you waiting 15 minutes after bolusing, when you'd taken it as well? Because 'Cause I'm just
I
thinking,
think I
that
had done,
hypo
yeah.
risk.
I went lower, take the information. I took the first bit of information of 30% insulin reduction, but I didn't state the start low, go slow. I started at the second rung
Yeah,
up of the dose rather than the first dose, because I thought, oh, there's no way that'll affect me. How wrong I
yeah,
was.
yeah.
How wrong I was.
That is the John Pemberton approach. Yeah, that's
Start high and
basically
go
how you
low.
ended up that's how you ended up with 2 puppies. You wanted to get 1, next thing you know, there's 2. Yeah,
Hey,
how did that happen?
they chose us. They chose us.
Yeah, oh, that is very true. The one chooses the wizard or the puppy chooses the owner. Okay, so earlier on, you were talking a little bit about how you brought on Othma and Desi, who you've met through like networking at various events and everything. I mean, from a personal level, whenever I go to any events and I say I work at the Children's Hospital, they're like, "Oh, do you know John? Do you know John?" Everybody says it. So Othma and Desi, you know them, and then they became part
Yeah.
of the board. So how did that
Yes.
change things?
Yeah, so the big change really kind of came in July. So when you reach out to people, and they're going to come and speak on your podcast, and it's not just you, and they're going to
Hmm.
be discussing things and potentially putting information out there, and also moving forward, the sustainability was only going to be possible if we got some level of funding in to make sure the podcasts are good,
Hmm.
to make sure the materials are good. Like, there's only so much you can do in your spare time. But for that, you need a whole infrastructure behind it. So we had to move it to a limited company, which is, again, to go from just doing it in your spare time to a limited company. If you knew what was involved, I probably wouldn't have started. But between me and Chad, my AI assistant, we 4 in the morning till 7 in the morning did and kind of set up a company, set up an infrastructure, set up a data
Crazy.
security thing.
Yeah.
And then essentially we needed within the company scientific advisors to make sure that the information we're putting out was good quality and checked and valid. Um,
Hmm.
Hence Othma, Desi, and also a good friend of mine, Adrian Brown, from assistant professor in London. So 3 really high quality scientific voices. But of the other thing that was massively missing, and hence that's why you're here, is I do not have a social media creative bone in my body, which was clearly
You
evidenced
tried.
by you. Can tell this
You
story.
tried.
Tell about the first few Instagrams.
Oh, it was embarrassing. I'm not gonna lie. You know, if anybody knows about social media, they'll know about like adding people as a collaborator on your post. But I think I remember that you added me as a collaborator on one of your early posts, and I accepted it to be a polite because I thought if I decline it, then I won't be able to face him. But then I did, and then my brother messaged me and he was like, "What the hell is this?" Because when you accept somebody as a collaborator, it shows up on your profile. And my brother was like, "He's ruined your aesthetic. Like, what is this?"
I don't even know what that phrase means, ruin the aesthetics, but apparently it means whatever you're putting out there is kind of like it ain't good. So that was
Do
the
you
point for
remember
me.
do you remember one of the things that you did? It was something to do with 70% time in range. Like, I think it was a clip with Othma, and then you put up a GIF and it said, "Wow, 70% off." That's what it said.
I thought that's what the kids like. But
I
yeah,
mean, I am a millennial, but I feel like you're an older millennial.
yeah.
So
I'm
I feel like
45
I'm
now.
out
I'm
of
old
touch,
school. But yeah,
but you're even more out of touch. So,
and the thing is, I don't really consume social media as well, so I don't even know what it's
yeah.
meant to look like. But from an important perspective, more so that, and also a total creative aspects of Glucose Never Lies. Kind of, you've got to know where your skill set lies. Mine is in understanding the research, decoding it, putting it into clear guides, putting it into actionable steps, putting it into a self-discovery learning format is something I'm very good at. What I am clearly no good at is translating that into 1 minute videos, reels, guides on social media that kind of resonate with people who consume that. And if
Hmm.
you can't reach people when you have something to offer, it doesn't matter how good your content is if you're not putting it in the format. And obviously, within your own personal business, you've obviously got a sort of a nutrition aspect already sewn up, and you're very successful with that. And hence, me asking you to sort of come on board, not just as someone to do a bit of stuff, but actually as a co-director, part of the Glucose Never Lies company, infrastructure, shareholding, and be fully involved, full skin in a game style. If you come in doing it, like we're going to do it together. It's not like, oh, lean on my colleague for a little bit of help. It's like if we're in it, we're doing it together. We'll go on a journey. So I was really grateful for you to come on board. And now you're taking over a bit of the editing of the podcast, which is amazing. Because again,
Quite
I
sad. I'm
will,
gonna have to edit myself, which is
yeah,
depressing.
I haven't got the
Yeah,
patience to go through a
yeah,
full episode and make sure that the captions are correct. I know I should do. I
yeah,
just haven't got the patience for it. Um,
yeah.
and also, yeah, so that was a huge game changer as well, because that's freed me up to focus on the things that I'm good at and outsource the things to people who are really invested also to do those things. So, yeah, going from like a part-time blog to a limited company was a huge learning curve, but has also allowed us to secure some educational grant funding and also at the same time go out to some of the listeners who have been extremely kind and through the sort of buy me a coffee have kind of sponsored the
Mhm,
podcast for like £5 a month or something like that. The whole idea of not accepting sponsorship or doing ads is want to remain as best as possible bias free. You can never be totally
yeah,
bias free, but I think there's a
mhm,
difference between taking educational grant money, whereas where you sign the contract is kind of they're giving you money to do education on a topic. They have no say over the content. They have no say over whatever. Now, granted, if they don't like what you put out, they're not going to give you any more money. But in
mhm,
terms of, I don't know how to go to anyone and say, this is what I'm putting out. What do you think? Is this true? To your products. We just put out what we want. People will give us an educational grant if they believe what we're putting out is good stuff. So there's a big difference between sponsorship advertisement and educational grant. And that's kind of the way that we want to move forward. We don't want to have those. If we want to say something because we believe it to be true, then or as close to true as possible, then just say it. Shouldn't be feel like you can't say it because your next bit of money is coming from here or wherever. So, but to do that, obviously you need the right infrastructure, and to have Desi, Othma, and Adrian on board was like vital for scientific validity, and then obviously on the
yeah,
creative side,
yeah.
needs to match the content as well.
And I think it's important that you kind of specify that because some people they might think at a really high level, they think, oh, you've got money from a certain company. That means that you've been paid by this company to produce what they want, but that's not actually the case. And then, the fact that there's a scientific board is basically to rein it in. If there's something that's a bit out there, yeah,
Yeah,
which
no,
let's
and
be
that's
honest, you probably could do.
yeah, I could do
Yeah,
that could do that a few times. But
yeah,
yeah, that's also equally it's nice to have the freedom to be as independent as you want to be, but you should also temper that with the ability of being as close to the truth as you possibly can be. And you can't sometimes see that yourself. And having scientific advisors on board is really helpful because they've put their name and reputation to the Glucose Never Lies, which means that therefore they will want to make sure that whilst we want to be pushing things forward, we don't
hmm
necessarily, obviously, they don't want their name to something that is also putting stuff out there, which is um, further from the truth than it should be almost. So, yeah, I think we've got the right balance, is why I would say for now.
So I suppose thinking about the episodes that you've done so far, do you have a favorite episode that you've done?
I've got a few. I
Mhm,
mentioned a couple before from the personal perspective, the early ones and the principles, but more so with the recent guests. There are a few that stand out. One that surprised me, I'll be honest, Partha Cars, one I really enjoyed.
mhm,
I've sort of known Partha a little bit from the diabetes circuit as such. And obviously, what you see is a very charismatic, opinionated, and sometimes controversial character
mhm,
whether it's on social media or on presenting. But what I was really struck by was what I've said a million times, a level of skin in the game. He doesn't just say things to say in it. He says it if he really believes it and is willing to put his reputation and everything behind it, good or bad, whatever comes. Like it's not
yeah.
like I'm doing this in a measured way. I'm doing it because I believe in it. And if it happens, if it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And that is not fake, I would say. I got a real sense of pure honesty with that. And I wouldn't say that necessarily surprised me, but sometimes when you see a persona of somebody, um, is very different when you get to meet them in the flesh. And I think, in fairness to him, he's got skin in the game for the things that he believes in, and I fully respect that. So I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that episode. And then the two obvious ones for me are ones where the connection's easy, it's just fun, and it's a laugh. So doing the one with activity and exercise with Othma in ESD in my so took all the recording equipment to my room at EASD. So he came up and did that with his colleague Sabrina, which was pretty cool. But that was just kind of relaxed. It was fun. But what was really powerful from that was I remember him saying he's got type 1 himself, but when he speaks to the people who he sees, which is adults, all the people who are older with diabetes, all the people who've done a lot of activity and exercise, and his feeling is it's better to have a HbA1c of 7.5% and be very, very active than a HbA1c of 6% and do very little at all, because the multipotent benefits of activity and exercise outweigh some of the disadvantages of slightly elevated glucose control. And I think that was so powerful because I think there's so many people who miss out on doing activity and exercise, and it impacts the glucose levels. You're missing out on such a big lever for your health and your mental health as well. So that was really powerful. And it's just good fun. And we're going to get him back on the podcast soon because we're just about to publish a paper together about CGM accuracy and stuff. So we're going to get him back on for that. So yeah, that was fun. And then the one with Desi from alcohol management. So Desi is just one of the best human beings I've ever met. On a personal level and a professional level, she's just a gem. And to sit down and have a crack and have a laugh for an hour about talking about getting smashed and drinking and being honest, that, you know, we all know that binge drinking of 8 units of alcohol or more is not ideal for your health from a physical perspective. However, from social, from what other people are doing and in your life, it happens, and that's what people are going to do. And to walk through that in a common sense and effective way, and also offer some strategies that have worked from a lived experience perspective,
Hmm.
not that there's any randomized control trials about going out getting smashed, obviously. Well,
I'm
it's
sure
turned
you'd
out
participate if there was.
um, it's turned out to be really helpful. Loads of people have reached out and said, you know what, actually, to have two people who are known a little bit, her more so than me, in the academic space, talking about things in a real way, is really helpful from other diabetes educators' perspective and also people with diabetes. So I really enjoyed that one. And she's going to come on and we did the alcohol one, we're going to do stimulants, and we're going to do hallucinogens and cannabis, where we'll have the same sort of approach with that. So I'm looking forward to those two for next year for sure.
Yeah, so I suppose a lot of academics are quite scared about talking about these things because I was talking to one of the nurses that we work with, and she was looking into that area, and everything that she was reading in that area said, "Don't do it." I
Yeah.
suppose what's different about the guide is this isn't medical advice. It's like from lived experience, and people are going to do it regardless. So you might as well give them the best tools if they're going to do it.
Yeah, and that's the whole, make that exclusively clear or explicitly clear
Yeah,
on the actual guide
yeah,
is the information
mhm,
that's on here is from people with type 1 diabetes who've gone out and experienced these things. There's no randomized control trials. There's just theory from physiology and then what people have experienced. So when I say lived experience, it's not just me and Desi. There are people that I've come into contact with both personally and professionally and partying with type 1 diabetes, taking a range of substances, drinking a range of alcohol, taking a range of stimulants, taking a range of hallucinogens, just open and honest discussion, and then sort of filtering that together into something which is helpful
mhm,
and safety minded, but also realistic in terms of what people are actually going to do. And obviously, I've got a fairly good, robust history of partying. I've been out in those scenes. I know what it's like. I know what people do. I know what the reality is. And I think for some healthcare professionals who have not dipped into it personally, it's hard to understand. But if you've been there at 6 o'clock in the morning, back at some house party, raving it up, you know exactly what's going on and you know exactly the risks that brings
yeah,
for type 1 diabetes. So you can speak about it in a real way. And I think it's important to do that, not promoting it as a good idea to do, just saying if you are going to do it, how these are the things to think about to stay safe is different than saying, oh, we had a great time doing this, this is what you should do and this is how you do it. That's not what it's about at all. It's about informing first, but also
yeah,
quality.
yeah. And I suppose that's a bit of a plug for Obviously, if you like the written format, then go on to the blog and read the guides because it's split up into each section that you mentioned. Also on the Instagram page, we've got like a short guide for each one, like the partying with type 1. So we kind of released that in time for like Christmas and New Year's, just in case anybody was going to partake, then at least everything was there. So if they
Yeah.
wanted to go back to it and have a look, then it's all there.
Yeah, and I've had loads of people reach out from through Instagram from the work that you've done who sort of said, "Oh, never seen this stuff before. It's really, really good because it's been delivered them like the meal insulin guide, like the mealtime insulin guide one that you did was really helpful." I looked at it and I thought, "Wow, it looks really good. Is that really my stuff?" um, but it's the way you
Did you
pack.
give yourself a pat on the back
Well, I give
when
you
you
a
did
pie.
it?
I give you a pie on the back. Oh, you've done this. This is good. But I think what is important there is that people's brains consume and understand information and take it in and process it very differently. Some people like a
Hmm.
podcast, some people like a video, some people like short reels, some people whatever. And the stuff that you're producing on the Instagram is certainly speaking to a lot of people. So, so well done for that.
Thank you. Thanks. So thinking about other things that are on the blog. So more recently, there's been a bit of a tech focus, with like a huge emphasis on safety. So that's like a big thing, especially as we've discussed it for the coming year.
Yeah.
So why was that's come about?
Yes, I think there's a couple of things. So the original CGM guide that was put up there, which is maybe 18 months ago, saying the AID guide, it's like anything. It was the best that was available at the time, but things have moved on. And anyone who subscribes to the blog or listens to the podcast know that I'm massively involved in the understanding of risk and the way that, in my opinion, we need to think about technology is it needs to be framed in an understanding of risk first, in understanding of the risk
Hmm.
of the therapy in general, CGM, for example, and then on top of that, specific devices. And then on top of that, whatever you're left with, which meets the bar, then you start thinking about what does it do? What fancy alarms has it got? What's the individual bits? If you start there and you don't understand overall risk and then device risk, the regulation isn't good enough to protect you from a risky situation. So the start of like the CGM Black Swan, which is basically, if anyone's ever read Nassim Nicholas Taleb, will know that when you're thinking about risk of things, if the ultimate consequence is death, which it
Hmm.
can be with insulin, then you have to take a very, very strong view on risk and understanding it and how to assess it. Now, if the consequence is really low, then you don't really need to understand the risk in that detail because the consequences are like, so what? Um, but in insulin dosing from CGM values, the risk is very, very high. If it's saying you're really low when you're really high, DKA is a serious risk. If it's saying you're in range when you're really, really low, severe hypoglycemia is a risk. And both of those carry a non zero chance of dying. And that's just the reality. So the purpose of the black swan is something from Nicholas Taleb is a rare event, but if happens is catastrophic, you need to take a different frame of how you think about that particular thing. So the purpose of framing CGM in that way is not to say that it's all of a sudden overnight changed into this really risky thing. It's always been there. It's just the fact that maybe now with these emerging technologies where we don't understand the risk because we can't see the data, we're also seeing when you produce CGM at a mass scale, there is also likely to be the occasional technology fault. It's just inherent with what we do. So as long as we understand that, then we need to always remember that finger pricks is always going to be the gold standard. So if you're walking around without a finger pricker device as an ISO standard blood glucose meter to double check when your CGM seems a bit off, you're putting yourself bang in that high risk environment, really
Hmm.
high risk. So the purpose of putting that out there was to try and just recalibrate people as we push forward to CGM for everything, automated insulin delivery systems for everything insulin dosing, run off continuous glucose monitors, because these things are good enough. They are more than good enough, but the risk still remains of the black swan potentially, which means you need, number one, to understand risk. Number two, to understand the risk of individual devices. And if those meet the bar, then we'll talk about functions. So we've received some educational grant to really push on this for next year, which is to develop a framework for CGM and AID, which is understand the overall risk first, understand how you can decide about device risk and which ones meet the bar, which don't. And then whatever's left, let's get fancy. Let's talk about, what they do and how sexy they are, what color they are, what different options they offer. But let's not do that first. Let's understand things properly. And I think as now CGM is becoming more commoditized and there's more devices available and the data is not there for some of them to understand the risk. I'm not saying that they're high risk. I don't know. And I'm not in the business of offering devices to people when you determine insulin doses when I don't understand the risk. That is, in my opinion, that's not okay. So a long way of saying a recalibration of the guides to be understand the risk of individual devices. We'll do that for you and tell you, in our opinion, which ones hit that bar. And then from there, we are going to do a super deep dive into how can you get the most out of Control IQ, how the most to get out of Omnipod 5, how the most to get out of 780G, a CAM APS, a Libra, a Dexcom, a Rush Smart Guide, a Eversense, all the ones that remain of that high bar. Let's totally get in there about what they all do and all the fancy bits and which one will suit you first. But let's not lay out 15 options where some of them we don't understand the risk for and pretend that they're all equal. That, for me, is not good. So really important that'll be a big pusher to 2026.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to know because a lot of the people that make the decisions to push these products that are really high up there, they're not working with the people. They're not putting people on these devices.
It's
That's the
called
thing.
it's called no
Yeah,
skin in the game. It's called
I wasn't
not
going to say it.
it's being called not exposed to the downside. Like if you're regulating or if you're creating a device, and this is the reality, you're not put
Yeah.
people on it. You're not responsible if something happens to them because you've put them on that device. So you can believe all you want that you've got a great product, but if you don't have the data to back it up, I don't care. I don't
Yeah.
care. What I care about is me understanding the risk when a young family comes to me and say, this young person's going to be insulin dosing off this. Do you trust it? I want to be able to say
Hmm.
yes. I want to be able to say, I trust it to this point, and these are the points where you have to do a finger prick. But what I know is these are good enough for insulin dosing 99.5% of the time. And there's certain devices I can say that about. Others,
Yeah.
I can't because I don't know. And I don't think that's okay for them to be available.
Yeah. And that's the really scary thing, like you said, because they're going onto the AID systems and these systems are using the CGM measures to potentially pause or push out the insulin.
Yeah.
That's when it gets really scary
Well,
that,
it's
we
scary
want
enough
to be able to,
when
yeah,
the user's making their own decisions off their other level when you go to AID. And
yeah.
don't get me wrong, 99.9% of the units that are out there are completely in the safe bracket, but there's a growing 1%, and that has got the chance of growing even further. So it's just important to be aware of what's what, and that's what 2026 for us is going to be such a big focus on. And I think really will set us apart from a lot of the other platforms that tend to just talk about and discuss everything because they're available. For me, if you don't understand risk and you don't meet that red risk bar, you don't get talked about because you have to prove that level first. And at the moment, that's not there. And I think that's problematic when
Hmm.
you have a comparison guide that's got 15 different options. Well, you haven't done your due diligence first. You haven't narrowed those down for people to say, these are where we really understand the risk and these are where we don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like you could get on your soapbox about that one.
Yeah, we'll get off this now because this
That
2026
would
has got
be
plenty
that
for
would
that.
be a 1 hour episode. So if we're thinking about, so we've already kind of touched on like what's coming ahead for Glucose Never Lies for 2026. But if we kind of look back to the episodes that you've done already on this podcast or maybe on others, so what's a conversation that you've had this year that stayed with you for longer than you expected it to be?
But I think it wasn't on my podcast. So I did a podcast with Jen Greaves, where she asked me to talk about the glucose never lies because she'd come across it personally for a resource when she was choosing an AID system. And sort of within that, we got into like the whole working, how do you work life balance, etc., and got into some of the challenges that I've had psychologically over the last 2 years from a mixture of a functional motor disorder where I was basically obsessed with moving. And then without knowing it, having ADHD as a diagnosis undiagnosed for such a long period of time. And those two combined basically took me to such a dark place by the sort of April, May time. So revisiting that was, it was painful after getting the diagnosis of ADHD and then taking the medication and really kind of getting back to being myself, but also really helpful because as will be clear from the last 30 minutes, we've got a really heavy technology focus on the glucose never lies, but it just brought home to me is how people need people. Like, without the support of you at work, without the support of my family, without the support of key people, it doesn't matter how much you know. It doesn't matter what technology you've got. If you do not have emotional, psychological, and social support, your ability to function is severely limited. And I don't think until that point or this episode within my life, I'd really given the sort of appreciation or the power to that. And revisiting that conversation really spoke to me. And that was also part of the reason why we started the Beyond the Numbers, to kind of go, okay, let's get out of our little technology bubble and let's meet some people with diabetes who are
Hmm.
doing different things from this support. And that was, that was basically your idea as well, was kind of like, let's go out to people who have got some cool things going on and bring in more of a people need people community vibe.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so you were saying the Jen Greaves episode and the conversation was the one that stuck with you the most. How about on the Glucose Never Lies podcast? Was there anything?
Yeah, I think it was the collection of the sort of the Beyond the Numbers. So obviously we reached out to several different people who had developed different levels of community based around generally their sort of social media. So Temi came on and talked about how she obviously was talking about her type 1 diabetes diagnosis later on in sort of their late teens, and how there's very little kind of community really available as such. So she started doing obviously Instagram posts, and then developed something called Type 1 Diabetes Brunch. And to sort of see how that's developed from just 8 people meeting up to a thing which is much bigger than that, and also a social media following. People obviously connect with her for several reasons. Number one, she's obviously got a cultural aspect that she speaks about, which is often underrepresented, being from a black heritage. Um, And also this sort of idea that people who are diagnosed later in life don't often get the opportunity to network with people and meet people with diabetes in a real space. And she's kind of pulled that together nicely. And I think it really, a lot of people, it speaks to a lot of people quite clearly. And I know you enjoyed that episode. And I know that you sort of follow what she's doing, and find that helpful, and have mentioned it to a few of the young ladies, certainly who we work with, and they found it really valuable as well. So, yeah, I mean, what was your kind of take on that?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the episode with Temi. I might be a bit biased, but I did really enjoy that one. I think, like
Is
you
that
said,
because she
the
says she's
Beyond
gonna give you free fillers?
yeah, basically. Yeah. Yeah. And she's gonna give you a hair transplant, don't forget that. But, I did really enjoy her episode and the Beyond the Numbers series as a whole, because I suppose when we're looking at the audience of Glucose Never Lies, it's people that are living with diabetes and also, like, academics that are working in the space. So I think just looking at somebody's lived experience as a whole is really useful. I really enjoyed Temi's episode because like you said, like, she's a woman of color, and despite getting diagnosed at I think at 17. Despite that, she pushed through to work, to become a doctor, living with type 1 diabetes. And I just think that whether she's intended it or not, she's become really good representation for young people that might be in that space. We work with teenagers, like, especially because we live in Birmingham, which is a really diverse demographic. Sometimes they don't want the wearable technology because they're just worried about, body image and things like that. But you've got somebody like Temi, who's a woman of color that proudly wears her devices. So, sometimes I'm like, have you seen her, or have you seen like these people online? So I think that's really important.
Do you know what I really loved about the Beyond the Numbers? And this is a recurring theme that came up, and it's something that just speaks to me because I do it all the time. Is the people who we spoke to, whether it was Kirsten de Klerk for CGM, Temi, Millie,
Hmm.
Roger as well, more recently. And also, I did record an episode with Gavin that got lost, unfortunately, Gavin Griffiths. But everything that came out loud and clear is that if they kind of believed in something, they just contacted people. Like Temi was like, yeah, there's things like with diabetes adverts all the time that don't have any representation of people of color. So I just email them. I just email them and say, I think this is missing, and this would be great. And she doesn't care whether she gets a response or not. She just knows it's important to mention it, and is willing to be brave enough to do that. And it's similar with Kirsten about she's now got to a point where they got 14, 15,000 signatures, and they're pushing to get CGM on a health service in South Africa because she believes it's really important, and just kind of, didn't feel like she needs to be in the health space or anything like that. It's just like, it's important to me, so I'm going to do it. And it just really spoke to me that the need for synergy between healthcare, people with diabetes, communities. There's loads of different ways of approaching a situation, a problem, but it always comes down to having passion, skin in the game, a willingness to kind of just reach out and go for it, regardless of whatever the situation is. I just love speaking to people like that because it just speaks to me. But I think it's about, if you want to make something happen, don't wait for someone else to do it. You gotta have to do it yourself.
Yeah. And I think Roger, he showed that massively
It's
in that
amazing.
in that episode. I mean, like, I think we reflected on it that, when you were saying to him, "It's so amazing that you've done this," and he was just like, "But why wouldn't I do it?" Like, people need to look at the blog. They need to watch that episode back where he shows the devices that he's made literally himself. So, yeah, amazing.
Is that? Yeah, so Roger, how long did it take you to kind of make all these things and learn and do it to get a point where you're comfortable with DIY looping yourself? And I was expecting about 6 months. I was like, it's probably about a month.
Yeah,
Okay. All right
amazing.
then. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, good. I,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that episode for many reasons, but just to so humble, but also
Mhm.
just so you can just see fire in his belly. Just
Yeah.
look.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose that kind of leads up to the next question. So, has the diabetes community, has it changed the way that you approach your diabetes?
Um, I wouldn't say necessarily on a day-to-day play-by-play basis, but I think it's really made me think about how people connect, learn, and resonate with people. And when you're in
Uh-huh.
healthcare, despite having diabetes yourself and not necessarily engaging so much on a community aspect and not really being on social media as such, it just really brought home the value of people need people, and the people need people that they resonate with. And a lot of time, healthcare professionals seeing someone once a year, like, you're just not going to absorb your information off them because, number one, you don't really know who they are. You have no understanding. And number two, you might not resonate with them from a skin color, a personal stance perspective, a cultural perspective. I always think about me, people who I resonate with. So my favorite podcaster and healthcare professional, whatever, is Peter Attia. Well, he's kind of like a whitish middle class man going bald. He's
I was
already
going to say
bald.
it's bald.
Is what I mean. He
So
ticks the
that is
boxes for
why
me.
he's
He's a nerdy individual with kind of like obsessive traits about knowing things. He speaks completely to me. So I
Mhm.
go and watch his stuff because he speaks directly to what I believe in, and actually personally looks a little bit like me. So at the same time, you can't expect that people of varying different skin colors, races, ideologies are going to get their information from healthcare, who they see once a year. They're going to get it from sources that they believe in, they trust, and they resonate with. And I think just sort of seeing the wide variety of what's available out there is amazing, but also just speaks to needing several different platforms and formats to kind of sort of allow people to find out what works for them. So I think it just kind of like, information alone isn't enough. Who it's
yeah.
delivered by, how it's delivered, the format it comes in is so important if it's going to hit home. And just that was quite powerful.
Mhm. I suppose when we were talking about this as well, you also kind of mentioned the buy me a coffee, and
Hmm.
also from one of the patients, I think that they said that they started using a different device, which you've also since used. Not a
Yeah,
sponsorship, not anything
yeah,
like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
by the
So
way.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I've got it in front of me now, the Sugar Pixel. So I'd never heard of it before. Someone sort of reached out and
Yeah.
said, "Oh, there's this thing called the Sugar Pixel where you can link your CGM to it, and you can have it in various different formats. The display, you can have something that vibrates under the bed." And I just thought, "Oh, I'll get one just to have a little look." But what it's done for me is, like, I'm working here. Normally, if I want to check my glucose level, I've either got to pick up my Dexcom receiver and press it, or I've got to get my phone out. And then as soon as I get my phone, I usually carry this in my waistband. So I've got to fiddle around in my waistband. And if I look at my phone, then I'm looking at WhatsApp or something else. This thing is just there. I can take a quick glance at it, and it's like half a second, I'm done. And my concentration can remain. And that alone has been massive. And then I think about all the kids who are under 8 and the parents are like not knowing what's going on and having to hassle them to check out the sugar levels and look at the phone. I just thought they need one of these in the house. So I think one thing for the glucose analyzer this year is we're probably going to buy maybe 20 of these for the kids who we work with, certainly under fives, under sixes, and see if we can get it to them and see what difference it makes. So I believe it make a huge difference. So just even things like that, you think you know a thing or two about technology, but it
Yeah.
finds out there's a lot more to learn.
Yeah, and I think sometimes a lot of the families, I suppose, they teach us about things that they
Yeah.
found out
Oh,
about.
100%.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
So I
with
suppose
the
that's just an example of it.
AID
Yeah.
systems, like, alone, they'll get you 65% in range, and that's for most people, that's okay, that's fine. But if you wanna get higher and more than that, you have to understand that if it's been suspending before breakfast 2 hours, you're gonna have to do something different to tackle the fact that you've got no insulin in the portal vein. You can only do that if
Mhm.
you fiddle.
Yeah.
Sort of later on before bed, the under 5s, they have a wicked rise in the glucose levels that the systems can't keep up with. The only way you're going to do and overcome that is if you fiddle, i.e., putting in
Yeah.
fake carbs. And they're the ones who show
Yeah.
you because they do it and it works. So it's
Yeah.
just people find a way. Necessity is the mother of all invention, and being able to be open to listening to that is key.
Yeah. Definitely. So I suppose we might have already touched on this, but are there any beliefs that you've had to rethink from having conversations with maybe like families of people that live with diabetes, people that you might have connected with on any other platform?
Yeah, I think I probably more than anyone, certainly up until this year, I'd say, or the last year, from personal also, this experience has been very glucocentric. And when I say mean glucocentric, I mean numbers centric. So I looked
Mhm.
at some of the original stuff on the glucose stabilized, and like my timing ranges are like 100%, and timing tight range was like 90%. And to me, I was like living and dying by that, which is great if you're so glucocentric. But what you're missing out on is opportunities to do other things that would cause your glucose levels to go higher a little bit. And that also that not everyone else is interested. And actually, what is the diminishing returns? What is the value of going from 85 to 95% timing range? It's a bit, but it ain't that much. And actually, what
Mhm.
you're trading off for is probably not worth it. And I think speaking to a wider range of people and seeing the impact of being so glucose centric on people's quality of life is finding out what's good enough. And what's good enough for one individual will not be good enough for another, but finding your own good enough, settling with that, and then owning that,
Mhm.
owning that you're happy to sit at 65% time in range. If that means for your balance and quality of life is worth it, then that is the number for you. If you had said that to me a year ago, I think I would have probably said, yeah, but you could probably squeeze 75, couldn't you? You could probably just squeeze a few more percentage, couldn't you? What could we do? But realizing
Yeah.
when people, it's good enough for people and it's the right balance for them, I think has been um, moving away from a completely glucocentric perspective to kind of getting a further and wider view has been really helpful.
Yeah, and I suppose sometimes it's looking at the person in front of you as well, like, is that really achievable for them? Like,
Yeah,
if we're
and
looking at
with
young
whatever tools they
people.
got, with the lifestyle,
Yeah,
whatever. It's just
yeah.
kind of putting more into the mix, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a really important message, I think. And especially because people have got this constant data, so they're always looking at it and then they think, "Oh, I've had a really bad day." But actually, if you look at the context of the last 2 weeks, it's not half as bad as you think it was.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
just kind of tried to structure the site for like, the landing pages now is kind of like how to survive. These are the non-negotiable essentials, and
yeah.
then everything after that is how to thrive. You pick
Mhm.
and choose what you want. There's a whole
Yeah.
range of tools on there. Dip in and dip out. You don't have to do it all. Just do whatever you speaks to you. I think is such a better approach to it.
Mhm. Yeah. And I suppose if we're looking again, if we're reflecting on the past year, so is there one thing that didn't go to plan, but you could
Well,
probably
yeah,
laugh
I
about it
mean, you've
now?
already spoken about it. The social media attempts on Instagram was just an absolute disaster from my perspective. And then as soon as you started taking over, then obviously people started to engage and really enjoy the content. And there's a lot of people who have then found out things about mealtime instant guides, about alcohol that would have never done because they'd never come to the site. They'd never listened to the podcast. They just consume reels, they consume small videos, short videos, and that's their thing. And brilliant. Kind of. I think knowing when to outsource out of your skill level is probably a really beneficial thing. And I've obviously got you to thank a lot for that. And also to humble me with your aesthetics are no good.
And do you remember the first time that I'd put a video and I'd uploaded it on your page,
Yeah,
and
my
then
wife
Danny
my wife said,
Danny
"Oh,
messaged
that
you
your Instagram, I like that. That's a bit
Danny
of different.
messaged
I'm
you
loving a
saying
bit of
how
that."
proud
And
she
that's
was
just
of
like a
you.
dagger to my heart. I was like, "Oh my god." The stuff before really was that bad.
Yeah. She probably muted your page before that because she was so embarrassed, but now now that's it.
Happy days.
I mean, I know that we were just having a laugh at your social media attempts, but is there anything that you're proud of but no one else might have noticed?
Yeah, I mean, sort of, we mentioned it before, the back end, to set up a limited company, to set up
Yeah.
all the stuff that's required on the back end to make it viable so you can go for
Mhm.
educational grants, to make it viable so that the information you're putting out is trustworthy and effective, and setting up business accounts and etc. Like the amount of work without employing an accountant, without employing a website designer, without employing a podcast person and doing it all myself is like
Mhm.
a level of intensity which kind of suits me at times, but also at other times
Yeah.
can consume me.
Yeah.
But to have that done is probably something that I wouldn't want to undergo again, but at the same time has given me a lot of personal satisfaction that I was able to grit
Yeah.
and get it done, and to a level which is pretty decent. So I think I'd say that's probably on a personal level, something
Yeah.
that I would say is I'm proud of.
I'd probably say the other thing that needs probably shouting out is the fact that there's been so many difficulties that you've been going on with probably pushing through, with your ADHD diagnosis and everything from that side of things. And, with the pain that you were going through, like the physical pain, then, and actually pushing through and knowing this isn't quite right. Let me do it again. This isn't quite right. Let me try something else. So I suppose some people probably would have just been happy with the first revision that they had. But I suppose
Yeah.
pushing through wouldn't have led to the diagnosis.
Yeah, no, it's to me, it's changed everything to be able to have a brain which is still on the hyperactive side, but more so on a regulated side, as opposed to kind of like absolute crash and burns and peaks and troughs. Just more of a stable thing is like really, yeah, been really helpful. So that's certainly made things much easier going forward. But
Yeah.
also having people on board who you can trust and do an amazing
Yeah.
job as well. So that's really important.
I mean, I suppose, like actually sitting next to each other at work, I feel like before you said that you'd started the medication, I'd said to you, like, has something changed because you
Yeah.
seem better? Yeah, but it turns out you'd been on the medication for a couple of weeks at that point.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Where I wrote about it, and also
yeah.
importantly got Danny to write about it, my wife, about what she kind of
Mhm.
experienced during that time as well. There's so many people who reached out on a personal level and sort of ever had either ADHD or some other diagnosis, either underdiagnosed or impacting on their life, and to be able to share that. There's like a fair bit of vulnerability, I've got to say. I ummed and ahed about whether to put it out. But I just knew that if there's someone who was struggling like I was at that particular point, if it helps one person, then it's worth anything. And certainly from knowing what my wife went through, I know there's loads of people who are caregiving out there who are probably struggling to believe, but it's
Mhm.
important that they continue the belief for that person that things can change, because at certain times you need that. And I think getting Danny's perspective out there was just massive. And I know for a fact, like so many people reached out and said, that just speaks to my experience. And it's actually made
Mhm.
me feel like, heard, and also that it's important, needs to be recognized. So yeah, I think that was a key thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was really powerful. If anybody wants to read it, then obviously it's all on there as well.
Yeah, we'll
But I
link to
suppose
everything in
on
the show notes.
Yeah. So I suppose another thing is like, is there one thing that you want to carry into next year and one thing you probably want to leave behind?
Carry forward and majoring in the majors. There's so much things with diabetes that you could do this, you could do that, you could do all these different things. I think there's a 20% of the things that make the biggest difference is to really double down on what those are, so that when people are reading stuff, they recognize that what we're talking about is the big movers, and the stuff that's not that important, then don't waste your bandwidth on it. I think that is a key thing to take forward. Leaving behind, never doing an Instagram post again. We'll leave that behind. That's a certainty.
Yeah.
um,
Hey, you
one
could
on
just
the,
do one. I can
yeah, maybe.
unarchive one of your posts. It'll look like one of
I'll
the
stay
kids
off
did it.
it. I'll
Yeah.
stay off it. Sort of leave that behind. And I think also, from a personal perspective, taking forward is that kind of the community aspect and going further than just the technology, mixing in people's real life stories and how they do things with the technology as well, kind of a dual focus. So I think that those are probably the things to take forward.
Yeah. So, is there any one word that you would use to describe the last year and why?
Yeah, chaos.
Yep.
Chaos from a personal level, chaos from going from a small blog into a limited company, chaos in
Hmm.
terms of reaching out to people and, kind of just trying to do everything. And I'm hoping there'll be more measured chaos next year in smaller areas, but I guess that's part of the journey. But yeah, it's been chaotic but enjoyable, is what I'd say.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, that sounds about right, to be fair. And you're
Yeah.
only going to have more chaos now that you've got two
Two
Glucose Never
puppies.
Lies
Yeah, well,
mascots.
I can handle that
Yeah.
kind of chaos. Well, I'll take
Yeah.
that.
So, is there anything that you're excited about for the Glucose Never Lies for next year? I suppose we can wrap up on that one.
Yeah, I mean, receiving the educational grants is massive because it means that we can now spend time, proper time, paid for, outside of work hours, and so I've gone to longer days now to free up actual time at work, outside of work to do it. So I think that's key. And we sort of talked about technology, talked about the CGM, the AID series, but there's a couple of other things that should be good. We've already recorded 3 episodes on a sort of a special women's special, menstrual
Hmm.
cycle, pregnancy, and exercise. Those will be massive around the February, March time, I think, for people for females with diabetes. I learned so much. I'm not going to spoil it now, but it made me realize how underwhelming my game in terms of understanding females and type 1 diabetes is massive. I think
Hmm.
that will be really helpful. And also, something that needs to belong in the principles and needs to be understood properly is what insulin on board actually means. So insulin, when you give it, lasts peaks 2 hours, lasts up to 4 to 6 hours. That's physiological fact. What you see on your device almost assuredly underrepresents what's working in your body and it causes so many problems. So we're going to deep dive
Hmm.
into explaining that, but also most importantly, what you can do to maximize your understanding and make diabetes more understandable. I'm really looking forward to that one. And then we're all going to Barcelona in March.
Yes, March. Yep.
You've got an abstract accepted. I have. Othman and Desi will be there. Adrian will be there. So we'll definitely have a glucose levelized meet up, maybe a
Yep.
party as well. That'd be pretty good.
I don't know if I'd be as hardcore as you guys. I'll be in bed for
Yeah, that's
9.
fine. You
Okay.
can be, the sensible one.
Yeah, so that's exciting things coming for 2026. If anybody's got any ideas on anything that they want to see, then definitely that they can reach out because our email addresses will be in the show notes as well.
Yeah, and I just want to say a massive thank you. So if you're still listening at this point, an hour in, then first of all, good on you. But
I
second of all,
know.
you're probably
How
one
did
of the
they do
glucose
this?
you're probably one of the glucose levelized hardcore people who've either been here from the start or have enjoyed things that have gone on. And your feedback, support, enthusiasm, and just as I get emails all the time, and you sometimes not just forget why you're doing it, but you forget what opportunities it gives some people sometimes, and it really makes a difference. And to get that feedback is so nice. And yeah, so I just want to say I appreciate the people who tune in,
Yep.
and we'll
Cool.
kick on in 2026.
Yep.
All right, well, see you back
Perfect.
at work then on Monday. Yeah.
Yeah. See you then.
All right, see you later.
Bye.